Around 4 years ago, I already reviewed New World, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 10. That was basically directly on launch. Now, has that rating changed? Has it gotten better? Or did it get worse somehow? So I've recently started playing New World again in anticipation for the new expansion Nighthaven, because I was really looking forward to the new build making options that they presented in their preview of the expansion. And since it was free, mostly I just had to buy the Angry Earth expansion. It wasn't really a problem. Now, the Angry Earth expansion stuff, you don't even have to think about that anymore. Preemptively, if you have the base game right now, you can play New World and everything in it. So you don't have to play more. But if you don't own any New World right now, and you've never bought the base game when it launched, it will cost you 60 bucks. And we'll talk about if that's worth it or not. First of all, New World on launch was a pretty unique experience, as it started out more of a survival game, and then they kind of changed up to an MMO, and it was kind of all over the place. It was buggy, messy, repetitive. New World on launch had two major positives. One, it didn't have any pay to win whatsoever. No battle passes. You buy the game once, you have it forever. Two, it was more of a sandbox experience that you can just go out in the world, gather, grind elite mobs, grind wherever you want, do whatever you want, do town board missions, do side quests, do whatever the hell you feel like doing. Now that has changed significantly. When I came back, I re-leveled again. I made a new character and I leveled from scratch. And the first thing that I noticed was, this is the most brain-dead, disgustingly pathetic main story quest slop experience that I had the displeasure of playing in a long time. There's no challenge, there's no reason to do anything outside of the main story. Every little step of the way, there's a yellow marker telling you exactly where to go. There's literally zero reason to do anything else until you're max level, because the main story quest also showers you with items. It showers you with, obviously, experience, gold, everything that you will ever need. And on top of that, there's specific things that you will gain through the main story quest that are necessary for the later parts of the game, like the Azoth staff or simply unlocking a region. I'm actually not quite sure if that also applies to Nighthaven, the newest one, but I'm assuming so. In comparison to launch, where you basically did very repetitive town board missions all the time, it completely scrapped the open world experience, made the open world irrelevant essentially for leveling, and just made you follow a main story quest, which in my opinion is a big downside and actually made the game worse. I would actually rate New World from a leveling experience significantly worse than on launch, although obviously launch wasn't good either. But that being said, I think launch had a much better angle, a much better direction of how leveling should be, where you're more interacting with the world, where you're doing crafting and gathering on the way while you're doing other things. Open world PvP is happening all the time. All of those things were a core part of why people liked New World on launch, and none of that still exists. Next up, we should probably talk about the combat, and well, specifically melee combat, or combat in general, hasn't really changed at all. Neither did the skill trees, by the way. They're still an absolute joke. Just slight balance changes here and there, but they're basically the same thing. So the combat is still pretty terrible. It's always been terrible, by the way. It has auto-targeting for melee, where you're kind of chasing the targets while just pressing left-click around. And now it has even lock-on, so some weapons, specifically blunderbuss, are pretty busted. The collision, the weird collision that happens between characters and NPCs and PvP and everything still exists. It's still clunky as all hell. Not much has changed there. And the range combat is still relatively decent. I always say melee combat in this game is probably a 2 out of 10, and range is between a 4 and a 5. Because as range, you actually have to aim, you actually have much more control over your character. While in melee, it feels like the game does most of the things for you. There's not much going on there, and I still think it's clunky and janky, and especially the collision between your character and whatever you're trying to hit is really messing up the combat all the time in melee. It's terrible. whoever tells you New World has great combat is completely cooked in the head, in my opinion. And it's a joke. It's terrible. Okay, if you compare that to basically any other current MMO, with the exceptions of maybe RuneScape and Throne and Liberty, this is worse than all of the other ones. Yeah, I think a big reason why people get this impression that the combat is fun and engaging and cool is the sound design. The sound design of New World is actually better than anything else in the game for some reason. I don't know why that's like that, but apparently they got really lucky with their sound designers and not so lucky with their game designers. Although, that being said, Ranged also still has, well, a couple of issues.
What? How did you do this? What? This is not fair. He can throw around the corner. It's like in this movie, Wanted.
Gathering life scaling feels largely unchanged, but especially the gathering is obviously significantly less important, and there's also these cringe-ass faction boxes that basically level for you if you have gold. I don't know. There's not even a point in gathering and leveling your gathering because you can just pay gold and level your gathering instead. The crafting still has its place, and there's, with a new perk system, definitely crafting is relevant, but gathering anything open world is kind of a lot less relevant nowadays. And that brings me to the end game, because there is one piece of content that, well, does exist in the open world, and you probably know what I'm talking about. Chest runs. Yes, chest runs still exist. Although the reason why you do them is a little bit different, because back in the day you had to upgrade your watermark so you can get better and better gear and whatever, but that's not the case anymore. Chest runs are now basically just there to give you umbral shards, which upgrade gear that is 700 gear score or higher. And that has a weekly limit. So, yeah, that's basically the only open world thing you can do. So essentially what you do in Endgame, you stand in a capital city, like the new one, which I think is terribly designed, and you press on the activities button up here, which loads for some reason, and then you just queue up for one of these things. And we already talked about normal expeditions and mutated ones, but there's also these 3 PvP modes: Capture the Flag, which is the best one, Outpost Rush, and 3v3 Arena, none of which have a ranked mode, by the way, so they're kind of pointless to do unless you're gonna farm gold track, which is this. So unless you grind the PvP track here. Then you also have the new mode, which is Catacombs, which on its own right deserves a whole video because it's so terrible. It's very repetitive. The affliction, it's basically a roguelike mode, and all of the afflictions, all of the attributes, the bony, the enemies, everything is just incredibly boring. It's honestly worse than Torghast and WoW, if you remember this, and that's impressive, because Torghast was really bad and this is just worse. And so you do this like 10 times and you're over it. It's incredibly boring. It's incredibly uninspired and uncreative. Basically just recycled everything. No new bosses, no new anything. It's just putting random shit in rooms, and that's it. Yeah, I'm not a fan. Then you have soul trials and season trials. These are basically like things that no one does ever. We did these 2 season trials just for like an artifact quest on the hatchery, but they're not fun nor engaging nor rewarding, so you basically just do them for artifact quest stuff. Elite trial, which there's only one of. I've never done this worm. Everyone says I shouldn't because it's the worst fight in the game. It's so fucking bad. And then you have raids. There's 2 of which now with the new expansion. I have completed the Hive of Gorgons twice before the update launched, and I was incredibly disappointed with that once again. I mean, Hive of Gorgons implies you're fighting Medusas and that kind of stuff. You're not really doing any of that. The first boss is a dinosaur, the second boss is a werewolf, and the third boss is a snail. And all of those mechanics, well, the second boss I kind of liked, but the first and the last boss were complete failures. Very boring fights, basically forcing you to play ranged. Especially the third one, and overall not very good mechanics. Again, the collision, the combat itself really holds the game back. But even if there is really cool mechanics, it doesn't feel that good to interact with. And if you do these raids, especially as a melee, the collision boxes of the bosses is so big You're basically being pushed around constantly, and it's super annoying to even play the game. The new raid I haven't tried yet. That's basically the entire endgame content you're gonna do. You're gonna queue up for random instance shit, or you're gonna do chest runs. If I move my camera up here, that's basically all of these things in the chat you can see is a chest run. Someone wants to do a chest run, a global run, or a merc run, or someone's looking for the Gorgon raid, or something like that. Okay, so there's not much happening here. You can still do the open world PvP, and there's still territory control and all of that, but it's much less prevalent because everyone is in instances all the time or doing chest runs or some other shit, so not very interesting on any front. And obviously through the endgame being like that, most of this world is irrelevant, especially the leveling regions, right? So you Monarch's Bluff, Windsward, Reekwater, Everfall, Ebonscale, Brightwood, Weaver's Fen, Restless Shore, Morningdale, Eden Grove, Great Cleave, Brimstone Sands now, but besides the wall, I guess, in some elite spots. But especially the ones that you would think, oh, they put a lot of effort into that during the leveling. I used to gather wood in all of these, and then I found some star metal. Basically irrelevant. You could probably erase all of these zones, and no one would even fucking notice. That's because the game is a theme park game now. As you can see, every single side quest in the game for me is still on the map because I didn't do a single one. There's no point. There's no reason to do those, okay? So, I'm pretty disappointed with where the game went. Admittedly, obviously they have a lot more endgame content. New World on launch was bare bones at best on all of the content, but at least the leveling was somewhat enjoyable. Now, the leveling is the worst piece of shit you will ever play, and the endgame is just a theme park MMO. So, with that being said, I already lowered Lost Ark and BDO down from okay to lacking, because they are. New World was a 3.5 out of 10 on launch, and honestly, the endgame has been significantly improved, but all of the other things are still holding it back so much. The leveling is so much worse, and the general direction to go into more instance content and less about the world and less about exploring, I think is a classic case of 2 steps forward and 2 steps back. New World, I would only recommend to people who already own the base game, because trying it now is for free, or people that are looking for a mediocre theme park MMO with a subpar combat system. And, well, the only redeeming factor really is that there isn't really pay to win besides the season pass. Although the season pass is probably one of the tamest versions of pay to win you can have in modern MMOs. So let's just argue that the game is next to zero pay to win, and that is pretty rare nowadays, right? If you're looking for a mediocre theme park MMO and you don't know what to do with your life, try it out. Would I recommend paying $60 for New World or 60 euros? Absolutely not. You can do something better with your time. If you have the base game, go try it out. The score for me is basically unchanged. It's very clear still that they don't really understand what makes an MMO feel good to play. And it's also very clear that they completely abandoned their original vision of having a more modern take on RuneScape, if you will. That's all gone. They basically just said, okay, this game's not gonna last very long. We will just do the easy thing and just make it into another slop theme park MMO where people play 100, 200 hours and then move on again. As you can hear in my voice, I'm demoralized by playing MMOs in general because all of them are getting worse, in my opinion. New World has stayed the same at least, but I can't in good conscience give this a higher score. It's bad. Yeah, I hope this was helpful to you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you guys in the next one. And hopefully at some point we'll get a good MMO again. I don't believe so, though. Peace.